Hi, everyone. This is Spiritually Speaking, and I am Dee May. Welcome back to another beautiful episode. Today, I have with me the wonderful Juanie, and she's going to tell us all about what she does in this life. Hi, Juanie. Thanks for being with me today.
Hi. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. So, like you mentioned, my name is Juanie. I founded Hidden Hollow Holistics. It is really a space that I'm cultivating for people to do a lot of self exploration. I believe that when we are focusing on improving the self, it also coalesces with us improving our ability to engage with our communities. And so I really focus on people from a stance of like herbal somatics. So really pairing people with a plant teacher for a season to be able to grow closer to nature. I'm an animist, and so I really believe that the way that we change our relationship with nature and the earth that we live on is by cultivating new relationships with it. And what a perfect way to do it than with a plant teacher. And so I make, products to be able to support that. We do digital journals so that you can kind of keep a catalog of, your different experiences, your dreams, perhaps your tarot readings with them, your meditations, which I find lovely, and even working with them in like tinctures and teas and stuff. And then we do some like intuitive guidance because sometimes people come to me and they don't really know what, they just know they want something different. And so, really working with people in terms of like a death and rebirth cycle, because I believe like back in the day it used to be like, okay, you're moved from teenager to adulthood, and that's a cycle, and then sometime in, you hit middle age and you hit this, midlife crisis, and that's a cycle. But what I found is there's actually multitudes of these cycles. We're having
Yes.
to let go of these pieces of us that just no longer serve us anymore. Maybe they were suitable to get us where we are, but now they're actually causing more harm than good, and you've got to find ways to let them go. And sometimes we don't want to let them go. And so,
Mm,
really honoring that grief that we're moving through when we have to make change so that we can transform and become the people that we want to be in life. Because I think that's part of the journey. You don't just wake up one day and you're poof, this is who I am. It takes intention. It takes a lot of work, and it's not always easy work. And having a support system is important.
mhm. Oh, I agree with you 100%. It is important. And
Absolutely.
I have found, having said that though, I have found that there have been times in my life where I've been going through something and wanted to talk to people, and it seemed like no one was available. And when I first started having those moments, it was very frustrating for me because I felt like I had been abandoned by everybody and everything, you know? And then as I grew more aware and started paying attention to what was happening, I realized that these moments were created for me to look inside myself and go a little deeper inside of myself and answer some of my own questions.
No, you're 100% right. And I think that's why I put a lot of love and intention into the digital journals that I create because A, they're digital so they can be reused multiple times. It's not like you write it and you're done. I wanted something that people could use at different points in their lives. And it is for a lot of that solo exploration at the end of the day because we don't need somebody to walk us, hand in hand the whole time. That's not, that's why you have your therapist and things like that. I focus more on being that touch point because sometimes we need just to,
Mhm.
am I going crazy? Is this having that person to be able to come to and just have that sanity check? And, as a shamanic practitioner, some of the things that I do and I study is things like soul retrieval, which is helping people reconnect those soul pieces. And soul retrievals aren't meant to be done like more than once a year because there is a lot of integration that has to happen. There's a lot of welcoming yourself home and understanding why these pieces left and how do we make sure that doesn't happen again. And so the journals really kind of help us do that, help us reconnect with who we are. Who are we underneath all the labels we've been given of child, parent, sibling, worker, whatever you do as a job. Who am I up underneath all of those things? I think are real important because you're right. It is isolating time with a focus on ourselves, but it doesn't have to be isolating at the same time. Like we can do that in a group of people at the end of the day, to where we have that support. Because you're right, I remember I didn't have, anybody to talk to. And sometimes, while that's great, it can also be, I don't know, it doesn't help. You actually fall, you just kind of go zigzag, sometimes spiral around, because you don't have anybody to ask. Even
Mhm.
just a simple question of, does this make sense? Have you ever run across anything like this before? Because I believe that while self-healing is possible, like, we are not these solitary creatures. We live in community. And so we can't truly heal without community at the end of the day.
It's so much easier to have a guide. That's what I've found, because when I was going through the majority of my journey, I didn't have anyone to talk to. I couldn't afford classes or, therapy or coach or anything like that. So I did my own exploration through YouTube and watched videos, but the amount of videos that I have consumed on YouTube is insane. It would probably blow my mind if I was able to remember what they all were in Adam. I mean, it's just been hours and hours. I mean, I'm sure it's into the tens of thousands of hours, seriously, that I have watched on YouTube, because I didn't have anyone and I needed something. So that's where I went, and having to find a piece here and a piece there over multiple hours of video is work, and most people aren't going to go to that extreme, and I know that, but I did because
Yeah.
I wanted it and I needed it. But having a guide that you can ask is and not only that, it's easier, but the advice and the guidance is tailored to you. And I think that's really
True.
important for people to understand, because there's so much free content out there that people are like, oh, I'll just watch that video, it's free. And while it does provide value, it's not tailored to your specific needs. So I think that's just really super important for people to understand.
Yeah. It really is. And I definitely too want to speak on that part when you were like, you couldn't afford somebody. And I can't tell you how much that resonates with me, to the point that, like, what I do, I feel very passionate about. Like, it's not for me something that I look at as a job. It is for me a calling. And because of that, like, the way I structure my pricing reflects that. It's, the fact that I make, certain things available for free every quarter for people is important, because I didn't always have those resources. Even on my website, I link out to other resources that are low cost, no cap cost, just so people know that there are options out there. Because that shouldn't ever stop us from being able to do the work that we need to heal at the end of the day. And so, like, I know I structure different times so that I can keep the costs manageable. It's why I like the digital journals, because you pay once and you get to use it multiple times.
Yeah.
Like, those things are so important to me. I remember when I first started doing podcasts, I actually applied to do a podcast at somebody, and they came back to me and they're like, well, if you're not making 10K a month, then you're not who we're looking for. And I was like, okay, that's fine. But, like, the people that I want to help are the people who are like me, who couldn't afford a grand to go and get some healing at the end of the day. And no shade to anybody who's doing that. Like, that's them, and great, but that's not what speaks to me at the end of the day.
Right. I'm with you on that.
And
And I've even said to Steve, I mean, like, we have to make a living. This is what we do, and our time is just
we
as
do.
valuable as the next person's. And it is all energy exchange, because even the things, even the free
Hmm.
content you put out, you're going to be paid for in some way. You're going to be paid for that energy sharing in some way. But it's I lost my train of thought. It's just so important to have these resources and share them without the energy of competition, and that this
Hmm.
person's, oh, I know what I was going to say. If you could measure success in people helped instead of dollars earned, and put the not that you're not going to earn dollars, that's not what I mean, but just put the
Yeah.
focus in the other place, because to me, that's really the important part, is the helping of the people, you know?
Yeah. I mean, why else? I mean, I definitely didn't get into this because I thought I was gonna, become rich for any means. I mean, I actually had a normal 9 to 5 that I also do. And that was really important to me because I didn't want to have to trade the direction I was going and how this is centered within my soul
Mhm.
to compromise those that code really for me. And so I supplement and I'm okay with that. And that's given me the freedom to truly show up in this space how I want to show up in this space, not because I've been, pressured because of other things in my life. Because you're right, we have to eat, we have to have a house, roof over our head, etc. And so, we make the decisions that we make to be able to support that. But I don't ever at any time want to take advantage of people who are already in vulnerable states
Yeah.
in order to meet my own needs either. I think is where I've found that that's my line at the end of the
Yes.
day. And
Yes.
so, and not only that, to speak to, when you're talking about, not every, somebody's gonna, they may not get the same teachings from like the same videos. I think about that, in the same context that I think about like herbal remedies. You can go and you can take an herb that may work for this person, but guess what? It doesn't work for that person. Why? Because their energies are different. And
Yes.
so when they engage with somebody else's energy, and sometimes they, clash.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all very personal.
Mhm.
It truly is. And how we, I saw this meme on Facebook the other day, and it said something to the effect of, we don't see the same thing, even if we're seeing the same thing, right? So if I like to use a piece of art as an example. So if there were five people standing in front of this beautiful floral, nature scene, they're all going to have a different perspective. They're going to pick up on different colors first. They're going to notice different. One person may notice a tree, the other one a flower, the other one a bunny that's in the foreground or background or whatever. They're all going to see different things in that picture. So I think we, need to remind ourselves that it's all so individual.
It really is at the end of the day. We like to think just within our own bodies that, all decisions are made in our mind, but that isn't even the case. Like our body makes decisions at various points in in our bodies.
Yes.
And so we don't have the whole picture of anything. It's just that perspective of where the action is happening for that particular individual. And I think that's such a wonderful analogy that you have there because you're right. Anybody I've ever talked to that, we've talked about art, it's always interesting to see what did they see first because I feel like that tells you something about them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, even on a different day, we may see something different than we did the day before when we stood in front of it, because our energy is different from day to day. We're not the
That's a good
same.
point.
And I
It's
find that
true.
because I do tarot, and I find that, I've given myself readings and used the same card has come across, and I've started doing it intuitively instead of reading the book, because and I love it. Oh my God, I love it. It's like what my soul has been waiting for me to do. But I pull the same card for myself periodically, and I'll go back and we'll circle back around to the journaling, but I go back and look at what I've written down previously, and it's completely different from one day to the next, the same exact card. It's incredible. So, but it's because my energy
That is
on
good.
those days is different from each other. So,
I think that's such an important thing because you're right. It does change our energy affects our perspective at the end of the day, wherever we are in that, and while there's ways to affect it, understanding how we're affected when we're in those states, I think is just so important and so enlightening at the end of the day for us to be able to understand how we react to certain things. I think it's fundamental in giving us the ability to shift that energy so that we can have different reactions.
yeah. Yeah, it really is. And I
Yeah.
love that you brought up the journaling because I never really used to do that much journaling. And then about a year and a half ago, maybe two now, almost two, I started doing gratitude journaling. And that was the only journaling that I could stick with. And I did that until I started doing dream journaling. I would do dream and meditation journaling about my experiences because I have had some absolutely incredible and sometimes a little crazy experiences when I'm meditating or during my dreams. So I started journaling that. And then I draw myself a tarot card or two, depending on what my deck decides it needs me to have that day. And I journal that, I give myself a reading and I journal that too. And it's been absolutely amazing. And it's so much fun to be able to go back and look at some of the readings and some of the dreams and meditation experiences. So I love that you do that.
I love that because, I have two journals. One is for the major arcana, one is for the minor arcana. And that's part of it. It's the pulling it the day, it's meditating, it's dreaming. So my workbooks and journals, the reason why I call them more workbooks is it's not just about, journaling whatever comes to mind. Like there's specific questions that get asked. There's activities. So there's like meditation. Sometimes there's art therapy. I always include like mandalas and stuff at the end for like coloring because meditative coloring is a thing, and there's things that'll come to you when you're doing that, when you're doing these mindful type activities. And so I have a lot of those different types of activities and stuff that I put in there to make it really dynamic, because it's not just about writing how I feel. It's when you're doing that self examination at the end of the day, you're wanting to ask yourself some pretty pointed questions about, what do I believe? Where do these
Mhm.
beliefs come from? Like, do I still believe them today, actually?
Yes.
Or is this one that I just need to make, go ahead and get rid of because it doesn't serve me anymore? And so a lot of mine are geared toward that way. But like the ones for the tarot work, especially, I did because part of, when I was learning tarot, and I do love that you said intuitively, because that's just so important to get to that state. But what I was learning, I was like, I'm going to spend time, like a day or so with each card to really like, how does this resonate with me and why is it resonating with me? Let me build my own relationship with this card at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And that's where I found it was really like fun to go through and to start building those relationships with the different cards.
Yeah, it's almost like you can hear them talk to you sometimes. And it's so crazy because, like, I had that, I mean, crazy good. Like, I don't think that anything is crazy, crazy because, like, I, I just had one of my friends' stepmom messaged me and she was saying something and she goes, "Does it sound crazy?" And I'm like, I don't think anything sounds crazy, but you do have these experiences that are just so incredible that sometimes you just kind of throw that word crazy out there because they're just so amazing and fantastical. But I picked up my card this morning and it's like, as soon as I looked at it, it was like, this is it. Like that, I heard it. This is it, and it was just so amazing. So it's just so much fun to like, what's this next card going to say to me, and how's that going to make me feel, and what's it going to tell me, what story is it helping me see unfold? It's amazing to me.
It's really true. Our oldest really works with people in a creative space with tarot to kind of help them, work with tarot to help, understand where you want your business to go and things like that. And I find that's just another great way to work with them at the end of the, try not to use, but work with them at the end of the day and work with that energy and just spread over the magic into the mundane. Let's be
Mhm.
honest, because,
Yeah.
I used to, when I was younger, thinking of like the magical and the magical aspects and studying, witchcraft and all of these other things. And it took me a long time to realize that I was the magic. Like that's what all of
Yes.
those things were trying to show you. And then how do you bring that through life? There's a lot of creative, like there's a lot of healing and creativity,
Mm,
just by us going through the process of creating something. And I know that when my younger sister passed away in 2020, I was in the kitchen a lot after that, and I found so much healing in the creation in the kitchen. And when we think about creating, we don't always think like kitchen, that's what we do all the time. And so I love to be able to share those things with people when they're moving through things, and just remember there's so many different ways we can do things and be creative, even when
yes.
we don't think we're creative people.
Yeah, that's very true. I've heard that from so many people, and I'm like, sure you are. And they were like, I can't do what you do. And I'm like, I have a friend who said that to me, but I do the twisted wire trees, but she does beautiful jewelry. I mean, she doesn't just string beads, she actually sews beads together and makes these
Mm,
beautiful, I mean, amazing
wow.
creations. And she also makes jams and jellies. And I mean, they're the best that I've ever eaten in
Mm,
my entire life. And I go, you might not be able to do wire work, but I can't make jelly like that. You know what I mean? That's a whole new gift that I don't have. I mean, I could probably make some jelly. I have made jam before, but hers is next level. I didn't taste anything like that when I made it, you know? So it,
I
it
love
does,
that. You're so right.
yeah, that's fun. It's absolutely fun.
It is fun. It is. And I think that that's such an important thing to remind people too, that we limit ourselves so much when we get into that comparison mindset mode.
We do. We do. Because we're not all meant
Yeah.
to do the same.
No, but in this day and age, it's so easy to understand how they get caught up in it. I mean, everything is so splashy when you go out on the social platforms, and you see people doing these things and living their lives in a way that you're like, oh, why can't I do that? But we're not ever seeing the whole picture there. We're not seeing the struggles and the hard times that they're having to go through to do those things, or if they're actually even doing those things sometimes. I mean, there's a reason why I educated my kids on don't believe what you read out there, because you don't know who the person is behind it. It's no different for us as adults. We like to think because we're adults that we know everything, but
Yeah.
let's be honest, we don't know anymore sometimes.
That's right. Yeah. My dad used to have this saying that he would say to us sometimes, and he would say, Don't believe don't believe everything you hear and only believe half of what you see. And I came across
It's a good
this
one.
video, reel on, I think I came across it on Facebook the other day, but I reposted it because it was like one person taking pictures of themselves, making it look like there were two people in the picture. So there was a girl who would like put on a big oversized sweater, and she would like put put her hand on her face and like take the picture so it looked like the man's hand was like loving on her, but it was just her in the picture. It shows exactly what she did. And then there was another one where this guy was like he was sleeping on a desk, and he had taken painted his fingernails red, and like he was like had the fingers were like in his hair and everything, but it was his own hand, so it's like for all of you that think social media is 100% authentic, this is not.
It's true, and all the filters and stuff like that to make everything look lovely. And I don't know, sometimes it makes me feel like that makes it even harder for people to sit
Mm,
in the uncomfortable. And so I work a lot with bitters, like with bitters as an herb, because I feel like not only does it have physical effects, but learning to sit with bitter things is important,
yeah.
because there are uncomfortable emotions that we're going to go through in life, and learning to sit with them versus shoving them down and
Mm,
away so that they can maybe take up residence somewhere in your body and later, act out as pain or ache. You know what I mean? And so there's a lot of work that we could do there, because it's not all love and light. It's not, and nor should it be at the end of the day, actually. It's I find all of it's necessary. And so it is, we talk about balance, but balance is important to find that middle road that you can go back and forth with ease, like a pendulum, depending on, what's going on, and be able to find your way back to the center once those waves go, because there's always going to be those waves.
Yeah. Yeah, they're gonna come periodically, and it's just, I mean, that's just the way it is. That's there, it's the ebb and flow of life. I mean, you have these energy. I mean, like, I mean, even the sun and moon, like you have the push and pull of that, and it does affect everything. And it's I like to say sometimes to people because they get so down on themselves, and I'm like, look, in the normal ebb and flow of life, if you take out every single bit of the outside, um, what's the word? Sensory, mm,
Stimulation,
yes, the outside
stimulation.
stimulation. If you take all of that away and just like erase all of that, just live in this like neutral bubble, there are going to be days when you wake up and you're going to be so freaking mad. You're going to be like, everything is going to get on your nerves that day, and you're going to feel like, a butterfly could fly by and it makes you cry. And then there's going to be days you wake up and you feel like you can conquer the world and nothing can get you down. That's just without anything else in play. Then you start adding in all
It's
this
true.
external stimuli that we have, and all of the day-to-day issues that come up sometimes, then you know it's,
Absolutely. I
we
mean,
got to
we're
give
running
ourselves some
across
grace.
people and we're picking up. We
Yes.
do have to give ourselves some grace. We are picking up all sorts of stuff as we walk through the world. Most of us just continue to carry it through with us to bedtime and get up again with it the next morning. We don't, I can't tell you how many people I know that at the end of the day, they're still, they come home and they're still wearing all the clothes they've used during work and all of that. And, wondering why they can't get rid of the thoughts about work. And I'm like, well, you're still carrying it with you. You haven't even shed anything physically, mentally, energetically, to be able to let that energy down so that you can proceed with the next part of your day. And so no wonder why you're exhausted of this, this. You need a break, and you need to find a way to actually give yourself a break.
Yes.
I know as a parent of teens, well, I have one teen left. Um, them and their with all of the social access these days online, but there is no break from
Yeah.
things, and that can be so detrimental to the mental health when you're not able to take a break from, whether it's bullying or, the drama that comes with, teenage life.
Right.
Without those necessary breaks, no wonder why they're struggling at the end of the day.
It's very true. Because when, I mean, when I was a kid, I'm not sure how old you are. My kids are older than yours, uh, mid 30s. But when I was in
Well, you
school,
don't look it.
you left school and you came home and you didn't have any of that to deal with. I mean, you might occasionally get a phone call, but most often you didn't, because people just didn't work that hard at that at that time to continue to bully you after they left. But now it follows kids everywhere. I mean, they have their phones in their hands all day long sometimes, and into the night, they're sitting in there on their phones wondering who said what about them or that person.
Hmm.
And it's unbelievable.
It really is. We work a lot in my house on, taking those breaks when there's holidays and just connecting from friends and stuff like that. From the phones, if, unless it's like, maybe just music that they're allowed to work with and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And really talking through, a lot of that. We, of course, work with a lot of like herbal stuff in our house. So like lemon balm is a really good friend for my youngest, because they tend to run hot. And so lemon balm's really great at helping cool heads prevail sometimes.
Yes.
But also lifting up, because we get some real stagnant energy going on when we feel like everything is like ganging up on us. Sometimes we need something to help lift us out of that. And so really, and the way we talk about it, so I talk about it that way. So even if we're not working with the herbal stuff, understanding the energetics of our own emotions, like, because
Yes.
sometimes it's just as effective to go out for a walk in the forest because
Hmm.
it'll help move some of that stuff around. And so I like to really talk about things in regards to the energy of it at the end of the day so that we can see how do we work with that energy.
Hmm. Yeah. And everything is energy. And it would be so nice if everyone talked about it in that way, that if, just moving, like sometimes just saying, taking a big deep breath and just letting it blow out, and just moving that energy around inside of yourself. And it's so incredibly helpful. And I think so many people downplay that because it's like woo woo or, whatever. But I would like you to speak to the herbals a little bit more because I know I do that too. I do mine a little bit differently. I do more essential oil type stuff, but it's all
Yeah.
kind of, friends together.
Yeah.
And I know that it's helped me so much in so many different areas. So what would you say to people who kind of are a little bit skeptical about that? And what would be a good, maybe small way that they could start experimenting with some of the herbals?
Absolutely. So some of the herbals that I always recommend from the get-go for people that are usually safe for most of us to work with are going to be things like rose, skullcap, and things like Tulsi because that's like a what's that, a basil? It's a basil, and so it's called holy basil for that reason. So it's from that same family, and it's food. That's a food type herb. Rose is another one that's edible. Skullcap, not so much edible, but it is so great for our day and age when a lot of us can't stop the circling thoughts. Got a lot of tension in the neck and the shoulders. So those are usually ones that I start with, and really what I recommend before we even get into the herbal stuff is understanding like herbals are not a one for one for medication. It doesn't work that way. They're not for symptoms. They're not for diagnoses. They're for they're not even for humans, to be honest, but we can work with them. And they have characteristics that can be very helpful for our body if we can understand them. But before we can do that, we need to understand ourselves. So, like, what is our own constitution? Do we run hot? Do we run dry? Do we run cold? Are we damp? So we're, kind of carry some water around with us. Are we mostly tense or are we a pretty chill person, even from a tissue state? You know what I mean? And so it's really understanding who are we first, and then how can we partner with herbs and which herbs should we partner with? Because most herbs will have an energetic state. They're hot, they're cold, they're stimulating. So that's really where I go first is, what is my body type? And then why do I want to work with herbs? I had, well, I didn't have, I still have, I have fibromyalgia. I was on some very significant medications to be able to manage my chronic pain. Honestly, I was walking around for years, and now that I don't even know how I was like, how I did anything. It was a pretty large dose, and I was just kind of walking around blitzed for a couple of years because of it. I was not myself. They gave me an alter ego name that they would refer me as, because it really affected who I was as a person.
Mhm.
And it took me a couple of years, but I am no longer on pharmaceuticals. I do manage my chronic pain with the aid of um, herbal substances, but it's not just that. Like, I've had to make a number of changes in my life, and everything from what I eat to how I sleep to how I move to how I manage my stress. Like, those are really important things that were foundational so that the herbs could do more than just put like a band-aid over it. Because I wasn't, if you're doing that, you're not really doing anything different. Like, if you're looking to put a band-aid over it, I get that people look at, it's safer because it's an herbal, but herbs are very powerful. And if
Yeah.
we're working with them that way, they could be just as detrimental to the body, actually. Because anytime we abuse anything to where has to be the sole reason that I can function
Yeah.
without taking care of what actually started that, it's not going to be sustainable. And so it's really pulling that back. And I really ask people, why are you wanting to do this? Because if you're not willing to do the other work, yes, this could help, but it's not going to be sustainable and it's not going to help long term. And what's going to usually end up happening is when we don't do that foundational work, we get a flare up or something like that, that what we've been managing with can no longer be managed because we don't have the skills on what happens during a flare up and how to manage that, because we don't know what triggered that flare up to begin with. And so people will usually give up on it and go back to what they knew. And so I find it's a way to be empowered in your own health, but you have to invest in yourself truly to take the time to learn who you are and what you're trying to achieve. And so some of the things like Rose is, most of us can have access to that. It's an exhilarant, it's great emotional health, helping people more with the emotional health as a way to start is where I like to work with our emotional and our energetic bodies, and from a spiritual standpoint, because I found that those entryways can likely be the catalyst that a person needs to invest in themselves at that level to make some
Mhm.
of those foundational changes. For me, mugwort was really instrumental in that. Working with mugwort, and I've worked with all aspects of mugwort at this point, from topical to internal to like essences, like smoke. Um, Mugwort helped me be able to move through things that I'd only been dreaming about, you could say, and actually move them into my everyday life and have the steel or the internal support I needed to get through some really difficult decisions that I had to make in regards to my health. And so partnering people with a plant teacher like that, I find is a wonderful first step for people to actually go, do I want to do this? Before they go spend like, hundreds of dollars on all of these different, supplements and herbs and stuff like that, and not really knowing how they're going to affect their body, because just because they help them that way doesn't mean it's going to work for you. And I hate people getting discouraged because something didn't work for them that worked for somebody else. Maybe it just wasn't your herb and we needed something else. And so that's where I really like getting into the work.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I agree with you so much. It's so important. What do you think holds people back from being willing to invest the time and energy in getting to know themselves and invest in themselves in the way that they need to before they start playing with herbals and different?
It seems like a lot. They don't know where to start. It seems like this huge thing. And what I found is it's little things and one thing at a time, truly. I think sometimes we try to do too much at one time, thinking it all needs to be done. And really, it's doing one thing. And once that gets a little bit easier to do, it's taking another one on. And it's those steps. And I think I talk to people and I tell them it took 2 years to get off of these types of things. That
Yeah.
seems like such a long time, but 2 years goes by like that. And when you're just focused on those bite size, I think it makes it easier. I think when people look at having to give stuff up, I'll tell you, my youngest has been going through or looking at what foods affect and how they affect their body.
Hmm.
And you start talking to people about food and they immediately, we have our comfort things. It can be hard to make changes. I miss cheese. And having to give things up and go without, if we're in a society and in a culture where you can get whatever you want delivered to you that day. You know what I mean? Same day delivery. Whatever it is that we want. Things are so convenient. And when you start having to do that work, things aren't as convenient anymore. And that can be difficult when people are already overworked and, overwhelmed. And so it's really like helping people find where are the easy ways that we can start making and just chipping away at it until it gets easier and easier. And so I think that's for me what I see is it can be so overwhelming. It can seem so daunting, this path in front of you to make change, that it just seems easier to stay and do what's comfortable and what you already know.
Right.
It's just we just stay there though, is the
Right.
problem.
Yeah,
And then
there's
we're
no movement.
unhappy and we don't know why.
Yeah,
It's stagnation.
it
It's
is.
total stagnation.
It
It's
absolutely is.
true.
And I haven't always fully embraced the journey, but now I do. And I notice that there's a peace in that, and there's a freedom in when you get to the place where you can embrace the journey and you're like, well, this is where I am. And I was recently told by my spiritual mentor, he told me to be ever vigilant and let things be your teacher, instead of getting so emotional about it, just allow it to teach you. And boy, that takes mindfulness. Let me tell you, that is not, I couldn't have done 10 years ago what I'm doing now. So it is that little bits at a time. You have to like work your way into it, but it's so worth it because it absolutely keeps things that used to be so stressful and so overwhelming. They're so much more manageable now. The same exact things are so much more manageable now. Those things didn't change. I did. The way I looked at them changed. The way I handled them and managed them changed. And to me, that's so worth it. It's so worth that energetic commitment to yourself to take those little bites each time and change over time. And to your 2-year journey, getting yourself off those meds, I used to be a nurse, and one of the things I'd like to say about that is your body becomes dependent on those drugs. It's not, if you just stop that, then you would have had a whole nother world of things that you had to deal
It's
with
true.
in relation to that. So you want to step yourself slowly off of those kinds of things because those are some powerful medications that they give you to deal with things like fibromyalgia. They're no joke.
They are not. And, when I tell people when we talk about those things and they're interested because they want to move away from pharmaceuticals, we do that with our doctors. Like, we don't just go out and think that we make sure that they're aware of these steps that we're taking because mine were aware the entire time. Now, it was my complete, like, they didn't suggest it, but I wanted to make sure they were involved because what if I had had a reaction?
Yeah.
Like, I want to make sure that, I have their feedback, they have any awareness, and they can make me aware of anything that they may already know about the process and what to expect. So I definitely, I know people that I'm like, I don't recommend that. Like, I just don't. I believe that there is a place for both at the end of the day. And that I think sometimes we outsource our own health because we don't want to do the work.
Right.
And it's why we don't see a lot of the medical professionals going, well, if you did, you look at your diet and your movement, it's because they've already said those things and nobody's listening. And
Right.
so they're doing what else that they can do. And so it doesn't have to be that way, but what else? I mean, unless you're willing to make the changes, then it's not going to get any better. And, sometimes we can't make the changes, and that's okay. But I found that there's always a way that we can make change, even if it's tiny change.
Yes, I agree with you. So, how would you encourage someone to have a conversation with their doctor about coming off of these hardcore meds if that's something they want to do? Because I know that there are doctors who are more open to it than others. So, you could talk about that.
Absolutely. I've always looked at my doctors. I know that a lot of us did not grow up with an example of how to talk with our doctors about what we do and how we want our lives to look. It's at this point, it's mostly you go to the doctor and you figure they know better than you, like, because that's is what they went to school for. They're smart, they know what to do, but we do know our own bodies. Like, if you just take the time to understand how you feel, how your medicine makes you feel, I always say go to your doctor, let them know that you want to explore this. This is what you're looking at. This is your current game plan. This is the person that you're working with. Obviously you want to make sure that you're going with somebody who's had the training for herbalism. Like, I've been training for a few years now, and it's not just knowing the herbs, it's also understanding the different systems of the body, how they're affected, how they're interconnected. And there's some herbs that is you don't want to work with if you have any type of pharmaceuticals because they can make it like St. John's wort, it'll make it cycle through the liver faster and it'll affect how long that medicine is in your body. And so you want to make sure that you're working with somebody an herbalist, and, I would recommend a registered herbalist. American Herbalist Guild actually has a list of all the registered herbalists and their clinical herbalists. So they're used to working with medications, etc. And your doctor, and you go, this is what I'm looking to explore. This is, the first step. To be many steps. This is the first step, just to see, how does my body do? Am I okay with it or not? Make that first step. Reevaluate with your doctor on the next step if that goes well. And look at it as a step down, because I know that while I am not on medication today, that could change in the future. Like, it's not looking at this as, oh, I'm here and this is where I'm going to be forever. Our bodies change.
Mhm.
They will continue to change. And so being flexible with that and understanding how that affects your body is important, and not having like this goal of, I need to be off everything, versus I just need to take a step down, go to my doctor and explain to him, I want to explore taking less of my medication. I'm going to work with these herbs instead. And I'm going to meet back in 1 to 3 months, no more than 3 months. Like, but usually you want a shorter time window where you're going back in, you're checking in, telling them how you feel. If you feel things are not going right within that first month, maybe you revert back. Maybe you took too much, you took too big of a step down, and maybe you need to have it. So there is no clear cut guideline, is definitely one thing that I always make sure people understand, because it's going to be different for every individual. It is being flexible and having a perspective of experimentation, and one of exploration as well. Because when you're starting new pharmaceuticals, they tell you it could take anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks for you to actually start feeling some of the effects that you're looking for. It is no different when we're stepping down and transitioning to herbals, and working with herbal medications, or just making lifestyle changes in general. It's going to take 4 to 6 weeks, probably, maybe even a little bit longer. Um, and when we work with herbal medicines, it's not like just taking a pill and then you don't have to worry about it the rest of the day. Usually when you're working with herbals, you're incorporating them into your day multiple times a day, 3 to 5 times a day sometimes, for them to really get in there and start working with those different body systems. Sometimes they have different agendas, which means they have to clear things out before they can even do the work that you're looking for them to do.
Yeah, that's very true. And anything worth doing takes time. It does. It really does. It takes time to be able to transition into. So let me ask you this. How do you feel like coming off of those medications has affected your spirituality?
Well, I can actually be present. So that's where I struggled really beforehand, was I wasn't fully in my body because I needed something to disconnect me from my body. I couldn't be present in it. And so there was a big disconnection there, because I was partly disassociated. And when you're that way, I'm not just disassociated from my body. I mean, I was disassociated from my whole sense of self, and being able to ground, being able to shield, to be able to clear your own energy field without actually being present in your own body and your own awareness, makes it really difficult. And I think sometimes it can make it even really dangerous,
Yeah,
truthfully. Yeah.
I agree with you. I feel that too. So I'm glad you spoke on that from your own experience. So because I
Yeah.
feel like that'll be valuable information for people to have. So um I know we've been talking for a little while now, but I in our pre-chat we had a little discussion about the fact that you are also a death doula, and I would love for you to speak on that for just a few minutes.
Absolutely. So I lost my sister in 2020, my youngest sister. And through that, it kind of revolutionized. I knew that a piece of my work was to work with death in some capacity. And so I have, worked with people who are at end of life. volunteered at the hospital for people who are, waiting and just being made comfortable. I recently had a client that left us in December, and I was able to weave not just what I had learned as a death doula, but also what I've learned as a shamanic practitioner around psychopomp work and stuff like that to help them cross. And so I really feel very strongly about discussions about death. I don't think that we normalize those discussions. I don't think that we talk enough about what to expect at end of life. Even like my client was able to be at home, like his partner was absolutely amazing. But some of the things that, they romanticize sometimes when you talk about, oh, being at home and surrounded by your loved ones, they don't talk about things like terminal agitation and how hard it can be when somebody has to be reminded every day that they're dying, that you're having to walk through somebody who isn't just laying there waiting, but who is actively fighting against it. And to be able to show up in those spaces and just to witness, to support people as they're moving through it, whether it's them who are actively dying or their loved ones who are supporting that dying, is a privilege. And it's definitely something that, like I talked about us outsourcing our own care, we've outsourced our dying as well. And we don't live in communities like we used to support that at home. Most people cannot support a at-home death. It's extremely expensive. And most people have to work. Let's be honest. They don't have somebody at home that can care for it. And we put so much of the responsibility on the nurses and the people who are caring for these to be the everything. And that is impossible at the end of the day. And so I think for me, when I look at the role of a death doula, it's like that intermediary, that the ability, what we would have gotten in community, to be able to support not just the people who are dying and their loved ones, but the medical system that is having to be the everything. It is a time, death happens all around us and we don't see it because it's being done behind closed doors. And when we come face to face to it, like we were talking about earlier, it can shift everything and leave us almost aghast at, oh my gosh, what is this? What happens? What is going on here? What is this all about? What are we even here for? And cause a lot of that angst because we've had zero interaction with it with our lives and how intimately it can touch us. I mean, I know people that have not actually had a close member of their family die, and they're in their 30s and 40s. And when you look at it from that standpoint and they come across and you get hit with somebody you lose really close with you and you've had no engagement, I mean, how could you not flounder?
Right. Yeah. And we talked about having death around you is a lot different than being present when that person draws their last breath, So
Mhm.
what would you say to someone who has experienced that for the first time and finds themselves now obsessed with their own mortality? How would you encourage them in that way?
I would honestly encourage them to find people to talk with them about, because there's a lot of people out there that are okay with having conversations about that. There's spaces now for people who self-ideate, like so for suicide ideation and things like that, because those are real things that people move through, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to hurt themselves and things like that. But there's spaces, and just like there's spaces for people to be able to talk about, well, how does death affect me? Let's talk about some different books about death. Like I have so many books about the different types of death and death from different, religions, or death from different cultural standpoints and what that means to different people, and being able to explore those watching, videos about as people are moving through that and understanding that there are so many different perspectives out there on death and what death is and what it is a transition at the end of the day. And I think that's the first step is normalizing that for ourselves, having conversation and seeking that out because we're not alone in those views. We all start from there. All of us start from there. And it's moving through and it's learning to understand ultimately what death means to us. And like for me personally, it's death is a transition. There's a dying act, then there's death, and there's next. And so, and that's a cycle for me, I look at that follows us throughout all life for all creatures, not just us, but we're talking our plant, our fungi, and our animal kin.
Yeah, it's very, very true. It is. And I look at it the same way. And I think it's beautiful. I always say, there's two really super sacred times in our lives, and that's when we are born into this world and then when we leave this world. I just think it's just beautiful to me. I mean, and having said that, it hurts. I mean, what? Loss hurts
Yeah.
because we don't have that physical person or animal or whatever here with us anymore. So it does hurt. But sometimes do you find that the saying to someone who has such feelings around it and they're struggling with it, that it's just inevitable? I mean, how do you feel like saying something like that would affect someone who's struggling with the concept of death already?
I think that yes, we have to watch the wording based on the individual. And it's not that we have to look at it as it's inevitable, but change does happen. And it's learning to how do we cope with that change and actually sitting with those feelings and honoring them because they're real feelings. It's okay to feel the grief. We need to feel the grief. We love them. So, of
Yes.
course, that's going to come on with it. And exploring the different ways that we can channel that grief and whether it be into creation, even in destruction if it needs to be, and to be able to find it ways to do those things safely to where we are not going to harm ourselves in the process because they're real emotions, they're real sensations, and they have to be honored and felt because if they're not, then I think that's when we get stuck.
Yeah.
We get stuck and because we can't move, we don't know how to reconcile it. And so until we are able to do what is that energy emotion and to move through it, that is necessary to be able to make that next step and change our perspective of it.
Hmm. And do you feel like journaling of some sort would help with that? Or do you have any journaling prompts that you would recommend for someone who's feeling this way?
So I run a couple of different social media accounts, and one of them is called Dealing in Death, and it's dealing.in.death, and it's on Instagram. And last year, that's what I did. So I did some what I called grief and loss experiences, and we didn't just talk about, they weren't just journaling prompts every month around the people that we lost, but loss in general and how that makes us feel. And recalling different parts of our lives where we've had to lose things and how that made us feel and how did we move through that and was that helpful for us because most of us have experience with loss and we have experience with how we move through that loss, but it's when we come into contact with loss without any of that that we get kind of thrown away because we don't keep the idea of loss a regular occurrence in our life. That's not something we like to think about. So
Right.
we only think about it when we absolutely have to. And so, yeah, I have a whole thing every month that you kind of go through and you talk about, there's somebody lost, think about somebody you've lost in your life and something that happened, if you could rewrite them today or talk to them today, what would you say?
Hmm.
Or think of somebody that you didn't get to say goodbye to. If you got to say goodbye, what would you say to them? And you can do things like burn those letters because that is fire is transformative. And those ashes could be blown to who you love for them to get that and a very energetic, stance. And so I really encourage that type of, journaling, but I also do love things like dance. We can move our energy with dance and bringing music into our life that helps us feel those emotions in ways that maybe we couldn't feel it without that music or without that movie that helps inspire those emotions to come and move out of us.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that so much. And will you send me the link to that so that I may share it in the description box below this video so people
Absolutely.
access that? Because I think that would be extremely helpful for people to be able to move through those exercises and
Absolutely.
come to
I
a
would
little,
love that.
yeah. So is there anything else that you would like to share with us today before we close this out? I mean, you've been amazing.
I feel
Gosh,
like I've talked so much.
you are a
You've been
plethora
amazing.
of
I really
knowledge.
appreciated you.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate that. I just enjoy sharing with everybody, and so I definitely say if you're interested, just keep in touch. I post a lot of things on the various social channels that I have, just to keep people aware and try to create community. And I welcome anybody who wants to join.
Yeah, I think you are a beautiful coach. I can just tell that already just talking to you today. That's amazing. I love it. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for what you do. Thank you for joining us today on this
Thank
podcast.
you.
And you'll send me all your links and I'll drop them in the description box below this video. So everyone, if you would love to have Juanie as
Mhm.
your coach, her information will be in the description box below the video, as I said previously. Thank you so much for joining us on this channel once again for another beautiful episode of Spiritually Speaking. And as always, I love every single one of you. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing and sharing this video out there to the world. So I love you all, and we will see you on the next one.